very traditional format of a burn supper, and we are going to have the Immortal Memory next. The Immortal Memory is really where we learn a bit more about the life of Robert Burns, events and pieces that he wrote during his lifetime. So to talk us through the Immortal Memory and to deliver the Immortal Memory, please welcome James.
So feel free to turn your chairs around.
That's not the people on the other side.
Are we sitting comfortably? Yeah. Then I'll begin. I'd like to start off by asking you what your opinion of Rabbi Burns is. Anybody have any ideas?
He could write a bit.
Okay, you could write a bit.
Like the women.
You like the women?
He's very handsome.
Very handsome. Oh.
Is he? Really? Oh yeah, he's like type.
Boozer.
Not Australia.
Not Australia.
Or Kiwi.
Any other ideas? Okay.
He was born in Ayrshire?
It was what, sorry, Norma?
From Ayrshire?
From Ayrshire, that's right.
Oh, Dublin.
Some people have called him a heaven-taught ploughman. And I would actually like to challenge that, because I don't think that's fair. Now, of course, he did have many illegitimate children. He was very good at writing poetry and composing songs. And of course, he's stood the test of time. And this is why we are here tonight, to celebrate a man like no other. We don't have Walter Scott's evenings, or any other people perhaps who are deservedly, or perhaps should have an evening to remember them, but we do have a Rabbi Burns evening. And it started off, I think, because Rabbi Burns was a champion of the Scots, up there with William Wallace and Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce? Rob Roy, Robert the Bruce. He was a champion. He was often advised to stop writing in Old Scots, but he resisted the challenge and the invasion of the English, the invasion of the English culture and the English language. And essentially the Scots' identity was in danger of evaporating. And so he resolutely wrote in Old Scots, because he wanted to protect the culture of the Scots and the identity of the Scots. He was a champion of the average man. Now, of course, he grew up in very impoverished conditions. His dad was a tenant farmer, struggled to make a living on the farm. His father actually built the house with his own hands. And it wasn't until Rabbi Burns' younger brother died at the age of 13 that he actually took the E out of his name. Burns was spelled B-U-R-N-E-S. Originally it's his father named Burns, but maybe Rabbi decided to remember his brother by changing his surname. Now, of course, 13 is a very young age to die, and lots of children did die young. And we know that Rabbi Burns himself died young at the age of 37. And of course, Rabbi Burns was a member of the lower rungs of society. They were meant to essentially be slaves. They worked the land. Some farmers or some field workers, people who worked on the land, were kind of tied to that area. In some ways they were viewed as slaves, and I believe even the people who worked in the coal mines in Fife were called slaves. And I do know that in East Lothian at Fosside Castle, somebody was hung, drawn and quartered because he dared to set fire to the open cast coal mine up there while they were demonstrating for their rights. It was a very challenging time to live. So he was a rebel, I think. And reading his autobiography actually appealed to me a lot when I learned what he stood for and what he fought against. And he dared to have an opinion on religion. And he dared to have an opinion on politics. And in some ways, he was very seditious. And the politics of that time were actually very challenging for people to speak up. And there were new laws enacted, so if anybody said anything seditious, so for instance, when the Scottish Parliament was opened and a man's a man for all that was sung, way back in 1765, 95, that person would have been executed for sedition. So it just shows how far we've come. And we have perhaps Rabbi Burns to thank for some of that. So people said that he was talented and he was able to do what he did because he received some gift from heaven. They were very religious in those days and denied the fact that someone who grew up in poverty could be intelligent, could be educated. And so Rabbi Burns was challenging the stereotypes. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why he appealed to many people. He was able to write poems that satirized society. Got people, the average person thinking, yeah, these people who ponce around in their clothes and fancy carriages are actually no better than us. They're just privileged and holding all the wealth to themselves. So Rabbi Burns risked his life in writing some of his poetry. And A Man's a Man for All That was written anonymously because he knew he had to be careful. And there is some speculation that the government was conspiring to arrest Rabbi Burns just before his death. Do you know that Rabbi Burns started a public speaking club? Anybody know that? Hands up if you knew that. It was called the Tarbolton Debating Society. He knew that by learning to speak and learning to communicate could free people from the control of ignorance, from the control of religion, from the control of politics. And he was championing the average common man by starting this debating society. He was also, I don't know if he was actually a Mason, but certainly he had relationships with lots of Masons. And of course it was the club to be a member of. Have you ever been to the Alamo in America and Texas, and you look at the names carved on the stones there? Almost all of them were Masons. So Rabbi Burns had an impact. And he knew that he was onto something because of the response he was getting. So for instance, he was able to publish the Edinburgh collection as a result of the friendships he built in the Masons, the people who believed in him. So despite the challenges that he faced in poverty and in going against the system, he persevered because of the response that he was getting from the average common man. So I would like to think that Rabbi Burns deservedly has an immortal memory that we are celebrating tonight. Because the world is, I think, in some way a different place because of what he inspired the Scots nation to have. And many Scots have gone on around the world to have an impact as well. Ironically, the Scottish Enlightenment was quashed by Pitt, I believe, and his governments. Imagine if that had not happened, if the Scots had perhaps been able to rally around Rabbi Burns, or perhaps come together in some way that said Scotland is a nation that can be an equal to England rather than a satellite state. This is very poignant for today, of course, when we're looking at what's happening with Brexit. So I think it's only fitting that we remember the great things that Rabbi Burns has done, the principles and the values that he stood for, and each one of us think beyond the propaganda that tell us that Rabbi Burns was a womanizer, a drunkard, because he was actually a champion of the people. So please join me in toasting Rabbi Burns, the immortal memory.